How you doing tonight? Whoa, what a night it is here in the Marsden Theater. People are coming in.
Would you please join me with thunderous applause and get up off your chairs and welcome my friend, a broadcast pioneer, David Marsden.
I was riding in the family car one day, and I was sitting in the back seat, and the car radio was on, and the DJ was going on, and I just blurted out, 12 or 13-year-old, that's what I want to be. And I got looks from the front seat of, like, what? And that didn't go down very well. That was like, oh my God, you can't do that. That's not respectable. I was sitting in Stratford, Ontario, and I had a little tape deck. And I would record into the thing, and I would send out tapes. I sent out about 100 tapes to about 100 different radio stations, and most of the program directors told me I should go sell shoes, that I would never make it in radio. And by then I was living in Toronto, and I had my little interview, and I went to Chatham. And there was another guy on the bus, we didn't chat, and I get to the interview, and the same guy that's on the bus is sitting there waiting for his interview. He gets his interview before I do. He comes out, I go in. The guy says, we just hired the guy in front of you. So I just kind of mope my way out, and I come back to Toronto. Figure that must be the end of it. I'll never be in the business of radio, no matter how hard I try.
I'm Charles Laquadera, in the middle of 10 in a row.
The greatest radio personality to ever come out of Boston, and one of the greats of all time in the entire country.
I was a cartoonist, and I went to RISD to become an artist, and I didn't realize that art and cartooning are two separate things. So there I was at Rhode Island School of Design thinking I was a great artist, when actually I was an awful artist, but I was a good cartoonist. So I was parking with this girl, she's kissing me, and she pushes me away for a second. She goes, you know what, Charles, you have the most beautiful eyes. You should be a star. And I thought, yeah? And I believed her. And that was like dumb thing number 2. So now I decided that I want to be a movie star. So I get in my car, and I go to California.
I'm Meg Griffin. This is a place that is straitjacket free.
Meg Griffin. I always considered the best female disc jockey I ever heard. Still consider that. I've never heard one better.
My love of music and my knowledge of music, just because I'm so passionate about it, had always been more than most of my friends. When I went to college hoping to become a vet. I ventured into the student activities building, and I see this big glass window, and I'm like, look in, and I see a guy that's in one of my classes who I thought was a jerk. And I see that he's doing a radio show, and I remember that first thought being, oh, if he could do it, I could do it. But I really went in just thinking it would be something else to fill my time while I was away at college. And no jive, one segue in, it was kind of like a lightning bolt. And I knew in that moment, in a tiny little window of a moment, oh my God, I have to do this. After, my whole life, up until that point, thinking I'm going to be a vet. One segue and everything changed.
Look at that blue sky. Welcome everybody to the Paddle Day program.
Paddle Day put Seattle on the musical map and laid the ground rules that we're going to play music that's local here. That's the biggest thing. He is the radio guy in not just Seattle, the Northwest entirely.
I worked for 2 stations in Yakima. The first one, which the guy hired me to go over and work at, he forgot to tell me he'd sold the station. So I arrived and everything was going good. We were #1 rated station in town. I was the afternoon drive guy, and one day the new owner of the station, after about 60 days, called me into his office. He'd made me program director in the meantime. And he said, the new music for KUTI is in the trunk of my car. Would you go out and get it and bring it in? So I went out to the trunk of his car, and there were boxes of albums. Oh, Broadway show albums and Benny Goodman. And I brought him in. He said, this will be the new KUTI music. And I said, you just paid a lot of money for this radio station. And you paid the money based on its revenues. And the reason that you have that revenue is because of the music we play. And if you change that, you lose everything. He says, I don't think you're going to be happy here. I said, not playing this music. He said, you're fired. And here I'd just been in radio, how long? A little over a year, and I got myself canned. And there was another baby on the way, my second son, and I was feeling like such a loser. Thought, what did you do? I knew I was right. I was 100% right, but I had just talked my way out of a job.
I'm sitting in the pub and I'm drinking draft beer, and I'm really getting upset. So I go to the pay phone. I'm all ironed up and ready to really give this guy a piece of my mind because he didn't give me a chance. And I get on the phone and he says, David, we've been trying to find you. Another guy has left the radio station and we would like to hire you. Well, I cooled down pretty quickly, He says, when can you be here? And I said, when do you want? Oh, tomorrow morning by 5, I'll be there.
I was a believer that if you can't get in the front door, you go in the back door. So what I did was I got a job in construction at 20th Century Fox. And then eventually I get upgraded to the print shop when I ran off all the shows. But one of the scripts that I ran off was for the Boston Strangler. So I see that script coming through the print machine, and I'm going, this part is for me. I want to be Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler. So I stole the script. I took it home.
The super sent me up. Said you got something the matter with the plumbing in the joint.
And I filmed 3 scenes from the script that nobody had seen, not even the director.
Okay.
Adam West's girlfriend was Carol Finley, but she was also going out with me on the side. And she was a secretary to the producer, Robert Fryer, of the Boston Strangler. I talked her into letting me bring my video machine into the producer's office.
Somebody's been horsing around with the float.
Not me.
He goes, where have you been? This is incredible. I'm going to get you an audition with all of the directors for the new talent part of 20th Century Fox. And I did the audition, and I was so nervous that it was a live read, and I just failed miserably. So that was the end of my acting career.
So I pulled together what little things I have. And I head down to the bus station at Dundas area, and I buy my ticket. And I put it in my bag, and I go to the telephone, and I put my bag down, and I'm on the phone calling my friends and who I owed money to, because that's how I was living off of my friends. And I said, well, I just got my first gig, and I'll send you some money, and blah, blah, blah. Goodbye. And I go to pick up my bag, and it's not there anymore. Someone stole it. Now I have no clothes, and my ticket and my money were in the bag. It's now around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I have to be in Chatham by 5 a.m. There's nothing to do but hitchhike. So I go out onto Yonge Street, and this guy in a big Lincoln or a Cadillac or something gives me a ride. And he says, I'm going to Florida tomorrow. And I thinking, well, that's nice. Have a good time. And he said, I'm looking for a driver. Would you be interested in driving me to Florida? He said, you could just stay there all winter and you'd be my driver. Or whatever. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, do I want to go to Chatham? Or do I want to go to Florida? Whoa, there's a decision. Well, I just spent a year and a half to get my first job. I finally got it. And now this guy has offered me to drive him to Florida and live in the lap of luxury. I don't know what to do. And finally I said, no, I have to go to Chatham. I have to at least try this thing that I've wanted to do all my life. So I got out of the car and I started hitchhiking on the 401, and I arrived in Chatham at 5 a.m.
Quit school, never got a degree. I sent out a tape, got a job to do weekends initially. Little house in the woods, pretty much held together by Scotch tape. 3,000 watt station. It was located in Westchester County, New York, so it was just about 35 minutes north of Manhattan, where my path first crossed Howard Stern's.
My friend Dave Pierce, who was working at KPPC Radio, he showed me how to work the board and stuff. And I don't know what happened, but I just ended up doing a show on Sunday nights because they couldn't find anyone else to do it. It was a KPPC Opera of the Air. I didn't know that much about classical music, but I loved it. And the way I described everything, I said, and then Carmen closed her eyes and died. And put the pot up and play, the music. Dun, 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 dun. And so I got a write-up in the paper. They said, this guy is bringing classical music down to the working class people. They eventually changed to rock and roll. They kept me there. So I didn't know that much about classical. Being an actor, I didn't know that much about rock and roll. I just knew the hits. I would combine Peggy Lee's Fever with Shostakovich, or I would combine the Rolling Stones with Bach, and I would just mix them up together. And people thought that was genius, but it really wasn't. I just didn't know.
And so I got my first opportunity to be a DJ. I was moist. I was so excited. I didn't know who Percy Faith was. I knew less who Ray Conniff was, but that's the music I was playing. That wasn't why I became a DJ. One night I just brought my own 45s in. I started playing them. But I thought it sounded kind of dumb if I was going, and now here's Leslie Gore. So I thought I have to be at the level of the music. And that's when I created the Dave Mickey character. And I started screaming and ranting and raving and talking 700 words a minute.
It's solid gold, all that's the gold, that's 2 at the night time on the Dave Mickey Show, right to you on 580. Okay, hot pastrami, mashed potato, the lovebirds on the veranda. From Eileen, they're going to have a big beach party, but they didn't tell me when it was, and I presume it's tonight, but I don't know. But anyway, if it's tonight, they're out there on the beach having a party, and they said that I was going to supply the music there.
I got away with it for about 3 weeks. Then Don Lumley called me one afternoon, and he said, John Moore would like to see you. Well, John Moore was the owner of the radio station, and a very nice fellow, smoked a pipe, and he said, I tuned into your show last night. You're fired. And that was the end of that career.
My mom got sick, so I came back to Boston.
No preservatives, no chemicals. Well, almost no chemicals. WBCN, Boston.
They asked me to come into the station called WBCN. The program director said to me, hey, look, we have a guy who's leaving. His name's Peter Wolf. He's going to be forming some kind of a band, the J. Giles Band or something, and there'll be an opening. Would you like the shift? And I said, yeah, because I would be close to my family.
He was a big lover of Carl Orff's Carmina Burana, and he would put that in between the Mothers of Invention and the Doors, and it would sound fantastic. And I think it inspired the rest of us to kind of move a little bit more in that direction.
So we're having an announcers meeting, and Dinah Vaporin was doing mornings, and I was doing the really good shift at 6 o'clock at night. That was primo shift for FM radio. And at the meeting, Dinah Vaporin goes, I have a question. How come women always get the shit shifts? I have to get up at 3:30 in the morning. How come the guys always get the good shifts? And I said, I kind of said, Dinah, there are no shit shifts on this radio station. And she said, well, then you do the mornings, fucker. I said, sure. And then as we're leaving the meeting, I go to the program director, I go, what did I just do? He goes, you'll run mornings from now on.
I was about to just give up, and the phone rang. And it was Don Lumley who said, John Moore would like to see you. He says, well, I don't know what it is you were doing when I heard it that night, but you seem to have picked up some fans, and they're calling us and writing letters. Would you come back? I had the courage to say, and I've subsequently said it over and over and over throughout my career, can I do what I want to do? And he said yes, and I asked him for a guarantee. He said yes, and then I said, and here's how much money I would like to do it. So he doubled my salary right there. I was up to a humongous $60 a week.
Good morning. I'm Charles Laquadera, welcoming you to WBCN's Big Mattress.
People are waking up in Quincy, they're waking up in Worcester, they're waking up in New Hampshire, Rhode Island. Everybody's waking up in the morning, so it's like we're all water, Yoko used to say. So we're all one, so we're all on this big mattress. And so, of course, now I keep the name and everybody thinks it's a porn site.
How you doing, Greg?
Just fine.
You sure, Greg? I want you to be a little more energetic, Greg.
Okay.
You married?
No.
You got a girlfriend?
No one serious.
Got a boyfriend?
I've known from I was born that I'm not homosexual.
It was very revolutionary to hear that type of stuff on the radio because it really hadn't been done before. It was really quite different than the sort of traditional morning shows that had been there before, which basically had been the sounds of alarm clocks going off and just saying, it's 8:18, time to make it to work.
I went to work at Sears during December of that year, selling clothes in the men's department. The other station in town contacted me and said, would you like to come to work here? We would love to have you. So 1st of January, I went to work for a station called KLOQ. I was there 11 months when I was hired away to go to Seattle. So in the meantime, I'd already started my first dance in Seattle out of the Spanish Castle, which was very successful. KJR was mindful of that, and so as they switched over to rock and roll again, they contacted me, and I jumped ship and went to KJR, but I had to give the program director a cut of my Spanish Castle dances. I was called into the manager's office, and they said, are you compensating him from revenues from the Spanish Castle? I said, yeah. Said, I desperately wanted to work here. That was the rule he made? Yeah, I've paid him. And they were like this. And I figured, oh God, it's all over with, right? Here we go again. They said, thank you. 2 weeks later, I was the afternoon drive man replacing him. He was fired. And that was the beginning of my long tenure in the afternoon drive show at KJR. I was always happy-go-lucky on the air. The Paddle Day, the disc jockey, is a little different than Paddle Day, the business guy, okay? Paddle Day, the disc jockey, sounds like he has an IQ of about 85 on a good day, right? But that was my persona, that I wanted you to know that I was having a happy-go-lucky day. And I wanted you to have a happy-go-lucky day.
My mommy always listens to KJR.
Yeah, my mommy always listens to KJR too.
There have been 16 automobiles reported stolen to the police
My mommy stole 4 of
during
them.
the past 48 hours.
Take your family to the Norslander Seafood at 300 3rd West. You'll like the Norslander. You'll love it there. And check the menu for their suggestive avocados. That's avocado suggestions there.
Said hello, hello, and well, baby, you gotta go.
I'm back in Toronto on the radio at 7 o'clock at CKEY. I was the king of the boobies. The people who listened to me were called boobies. And, you know, you had to wear black socks and white sneakers. That's how you stamped out elephants. And elephants were anybody who didn't listen to Dave Mickey. And in the fall, they put us at the CNE. And in those days, people were still enamored by radio, and they still came to see the DJs. CKUI had this thing they called a circus wagon, and the front area where the DJs were had bars on the windows, so it looked like there was a lion roaming around inside. Every single night, they had to take me in with security people. Everybody was fenced off, and I was signing thousands of autographs, and then I'd go in and do my show, and there'd be upwards of 10,000 people at any given time during that 7 to 11 period watching. I had no idea anything like that could have ever happened to me. I couldn't walk on the streets. I couldn't go out. I'd wake up and I'd look down on my apartment from my balcony, and there'd be kids all around the place. They would just follow me home. It was crazy.
Live from Studio 4 in Toronto, it's Music Hop. Now, here's your host for Music Hop, Dave Mickey.
Hi there, welcome to Music Hop. Today, for the next 30, we are going to swing and have a ball. Hope you can stick around, y'all. Yeah.
Drinking half gallons of Kung Fu.
An agent came to me and offered me $1 million if I would write a book. Now, $1 million at that time would be like, what, 5 or 8 million, 10 million today, I suppose? Part of the deal was that I had to write about the fact that I was gay. Now, that word gay didn't even exist back then. And had I taken that $1 million and written that book, I probably would have been strung up by somebody. It wasn't cool to be a homo. It wasn't cool to be anything other than what you're supposed to be.
When I first started to work in radio, I remember the relatives, aunts and uncles saying to my parents, little Maggie is going to talk on the radio. Because when we'd have family gatherings, I was shy, like a lot of people are. I wouldn't say that radio changes that all that much. And I think that if you speak to a lot of people who have worked on the air, they would tell you that they too have a level of shyness. With the radio, you can speak to so many people all at once, right? And so it sounds like, well, how could you possibly be shy? Look what you do for a living. But still, I'm in the studio not having to face anybody.
I remember one night walking away from the C&E to get to the car, because by the time I would leave my booth at the C&E, the thousands of people would have dispersed. And I'm walking along with a friend, and I just found the tears just rolling down my face. And I had no control over it. It was just, and my friend said, "Why are you crying? What's your problem?" And I think I said, "Because I'm really lonely." Because I was. I was in these crowds of thousands of people at all times, but I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know who they were. You think, oh, well, there's that whole ego thing, but the ego thing is a different package altogether. The ego thing is what made me sit in a little room every night and talk to myself into a piece of metal and think that somebody wanted to hear my music. That takes a fair amount of ego to actually believe that anybody would care.
We're running in the summertime as many as 50 dances a week across the state. So we had a major rock and roll dance empire going, which eventually led to the concert business. There was a time when the rock and roll acts would have one amplifier and they'd feed a couple, 3 guitars into one amp. And they would work them so hard because PA systems were inadequate, they would blow the amp. This kid came up to me and he said, anytime the groups blow their amps, I'm always here on Friday night. You can use my amp. I got a big Gibson if I can stand on the back of the stage and play. He said, and I know, don't worry, I know every lick they do. I said, okay, fine. But about 2 or 3 weeks later, Tiny Tony and the Statics were playing, and they blew their amps, and the kid came up and said, do you want mine? And I said, yeah. And he had an unusual face. You know, there was a racial strain there that produced a beautiful face. Yeah, it was Jimmy.
Pat O'Day was famous in that day, not Jimi Hendrix. It would be like a baseball fan meeting Babe Ruth for Jimi Hendrix growing up to meet Pat O'Day in that era.
I've had my fun. Now it's time to be serious. And if I ever want to be a manager or operate a radio station of my own, I have to learn all the parts of it. So I went to CKGM in Montreal. By then I was beginning to turn into a little bit of a hippie. I started to let the hair grow and the beard, and I started to get stoned. It was 700 words a minute. I just flipped it. It was really cool. It was so far out, man. It wasn't an act. That's how I felt.
I feel now when I look back on it that I may have been possessed. And that at some point around 69 or 70 I was exorcised out of that. Because now when I look back on that being Dave Mickey, it's as if I were talking about someone else. I don't see it as being myself.
How are you out there?
The Beatles were coming to town for their second visit. One day, they called from down at the front desk, said, there's a young lady that wants to talk to you. And so I went down. She said, I thought you might like to know that Paul McCartney is going to marry Jane Asher when they're here in Seattle. I said, where do you come up with that? She brings out an envelope, a big envelope that's full of documents. And lo and behold, they had set up an answering service in Seattle to handle all the arrangements for Paul McCartney's wedding. And the embassy had been contacted to provide a legal official to conduct the ceremony. The Spanish ballroom had been set aside at the Olympic Hotel. The food, tuxedos, flowers had been ordered. She's got all the paperwork there. She says, it's all been going through me. I've listened to you all my life. I can't keep it to myself. She says, I wanted you to know. And we investigated. We investigated right down to the flights. So on the morning of the Beatles show, we just said, we cannot keep it quiet any longer. While they're in Seattle, Paul McCartney will be marrying Jane Asher. We don't want to spoil their privacy. The location will remain a secret, and so on. Now there's a press conference at 2 o'clock that afternoon down at the Coliseum. So the newsmen are all saying, Paul McCartney's getting married, KJR says so. And Paul is looking at me and I'm like, right?
I'd like to address a question to Paul McCartney. Would you confirm or deny the report of your marriage to Jane Asher in Seattle this evening?
Tonight, yeah.
What time and where?
Tonight, I can't tell you that now, can I? I couldn't tell you. That's a secret. We don't know people there, do we?
You are confirming the report?
No, I'm not really. It was just a joke. Who started this? Anyone know? Does anyone know? I just got in today and found out I was getting married tonight. No, she is not coming in tonight, as far as I know.
And if she does, we are going out tonight anyway, so we'll miss her.
The show ended. The guys went back to the Edgewater, and the Beatles left town. And I was left saying, what in the world was that about? I was invited out to the University of Washington that fall for a special presentation that I was to MC, which I did for the guys at Sigma Chi. But the big award that night was the Turkey Award, and a national award had been given to Sigma Chi for having pulled off the marriage of Paul McCartney and Jane Asher. And I got the Turkey Award for getting sucked in big time.
John and Yoko came to Montreal to do their bed-in. Because we were who we were, the radio station that was hippie, we were invited. I'm sitting there and I look up and here I see Timothy Leary floating toward me. Almost literally, it was just like, there didn't seem to be any movement, he was floating. I met Al Cap, one of the Smothers brothers came. It was an adventurous weekend. Jeff Sterling actually was the guy who owned the radio stations. He was the one who funded the billboards. War is over, if you want it.
People are saying, what are we doing about Vietnam? And we say, there's a dust cart going along the road and it's leaving a load of crap behind.
One time, they asked me to do a commercial for Underground Camera. Get the name, Underground Camera. Underground, like hip. But Underground Camera was having a sale of Honeywell Pentax cameras. So my boss says to me, don't fuck with this ad. These guys are giving us a $20,000 account. So I read the ad, the way they wrote it, and all the people from Honeywell are in New York, the agency is in Boston, and they're listening on the loudspeakers to WBCN. They're listening to Charles Laquadera, the #1 BCN guy who's talking about their product, Underground Camera. This guy's going to sell so many cameras. So there's this long pause, and then I go, sure. Help out one of the corporations responsible for all those dead Cambodian babies. Go buy a couple of Honeywell cameras. We got sued. They sued our ass. The judge said we were guilty, fined us $1 for taking the buy and then having a DJ say that and demeaning the company, but just fined us only $1 because it was basically what I said was true.
They called me in New York and told me that Charles would not do the commercials for the Army. I remember having conversations with him about it's a legal product, free speech. Don't you think that, you should be an advocate of everyone having a voice and things? But Charles had, his way of doing things, and he was amazingly popular.
There was such a tie at that point when I was still just a listener before I ever got on the radio, between a station like WFM and its audience in terms of it being the center for information, all to do with the music and culture of the times, whether it be marching against Vietnam or finding yourself at Woodstock. And the loyalty to NEW was fierce.
From the front page of the Evening Seattle Times. It said that Pat O'Day is accused under the Sherman Act of monopolizing the teenage entertainment industry in the Northwest and is being sued for megabucks. And that began a long struggle.
We didn't do any business at all out of the radio station. We had an apartment that we rented up in West Seattle. We had a typewriter and an answering machine. That was it. We bought our advertising at the radio station just like anybody else. We didn't get a great rate, and we were one of the biggest advertisers.
After the FCC came to Seattle and held a series of hearings, bringing in the rock and roll bands and the Rolling Stones manager, and Paul Revere, was like a circus, right? All the entertainers coming to town. Just on this deal, is Pat O'Day guilty of payola?
Pat had never played a record as a favor, and I've witnessed Pat getting money in the mail and him sending it back.
The hearing went on for almost a month, and a very nervous time for me. I mean, I wasn't guilty, but who knows what's going on, right? Whole thing ended almost a year later with a letter from the FCC that said, after completion of one of the most exhaustive investigations we have endeavored, we find no indication whatsoever of any wrongdoing on the part of Pat O'Day or KJR.
Montreal was going through quite a shift. The French versus English had become intensified. The mailboxes were blowing up all over the place, and we were in Westmount, which was considered an English area of Montreal. I would say on average we had to clear the radio station about once a week because of bomb threats. So one evening I'm in the production room just making some tapes or whatever. And I get up and I open the door and the corridors are filled with people. And I notice that they have weapons. So I closed the door and I locked it. And the radio station has been taken over by a group of followers of the FLQ who really would like to put their message out.
FLQ protests continue today in Montreal as the organization demanded the overthrow of the Quebec government, the independence of Quebec from Canada, and the establishment of a French-speaking Quebecer worker society.
I just think I have to get out of here. That's all I could think. And I've got a friend with me. So we pick up scissors and whatever we can find. And on 3, I unlock and we come barreling out of the room and start running toward the elevator. And there are literally people with guns. And I've got my scissors, like, don't touch me. And so we grab an elevator, ran to a payphone and called the police. And the owner of the radio station, Jeff Sterling, was called in. He was smart enough to recognize that these people had a right to get their message out and said, if you will leave now and put the weapons away, I'll give you 6 hours on Wednesday night to come in here and do whatever you want. And he kept the deal. And they did come in and they had 6 hours to say whatever it was they wanted to say.
Pat O'Day, Seattle, Channel 95.
It was Saturday afternoon and I'm on the air. The station didn't have air conditioning, the back door is open. All I knew was I woke up and I was slumped forward and the record was going click, click, click around in the center, and I had this horrid aching in my head. I'm trying to figure out what in the world has happened. And it was a guy at another station in town, and he said, you got to be careful. There's a guy named Zane McDonald that's on his way over. He's mad at you about something, but he says, watch out. I think he's a little wacky. I said, I think he's already been here because we found a 2x4 laying on the control room floor that he had whacked me over the head with. So I called the police. They arrested him immediately, charged him with assault. His girlfriend and he would park behind the Yakima Cement Products Company and make out. The girlfriend broke up with him, but their favorite song was Are You Lonesome Tonight by Elvis. And lo and behold, I did a commercial on the radio for the Yakima Cement Products Company, followed that with Are You Lonesome Tonight by Elvis, and there was the link. I was the cause of the problem. I was the reason the girl had broke up with him. It's clear. Yakima Cement Products Company, Are You Lonesome Tonight? That's the guy. And so he was out to kill me.
Radio provides company for people. Radio is theater of the mind. Radio lets your imagination go in all kinds of great places. And radio can also be for somebody who is not quite grounded. The vehicle that allows a voice to come out of it, that all of a sudden they decide that they actually know you personally. That every night or every day you're speaking to them. And that after a while you owe them. Because after all, you're in this relationship and you've never met them. The guy showed up one time with knives and rope, and he had a notebook in his car with handwritten duplicates of every letter he had ever sent to me. I knew that he was going to show up that day because the police who were involved had said to me, invite him to the station, because we're going to arrest him. Because we live in an era now where there are so many ways to contact a human being and so few rules that regulate it, like email, it's ever present and it's unnerving.
There was a place called Project Place in Boston that took the homeless in. They needed help with typists and doctors. So I made a public service announcement. I thought it was being real cool, so I said, hey, if you're a doctor, Project Place could really use your help. And if you're a chick and can type, then come on in. And the next day, this bread and roses, all these women came marching to the station with a box full of live chickens and put them on our manager's desk and said, these are chicks, we're women. As a way of assuaging the situation, we started the first women's show in radio.
Most stations at that point had one full-time female. So they could say they had that covered. And in those days, they would hardly ever put you on back-to-back. So it's if I was on in the afternoon, it's like, oh, what Meg's doing afternoon, we can't put Jane on right after. We can't have two women in a row. And in those days, also often at a lot of FM stations when they were adding their music for the week. If they had chosen 6 albums that they were going to add, and one of them was a woman, then that would be the woman added for the week. No risk. Can't overdo that. It's dangerous, you know. It's remarkable. The big name in New York City at that time, Alison Steele, the Nightbird. Very breathy, very sexy. Lots of poetry and candles. The exact opposite of who I felt that I was. I was rock and roll and jeans and sneakers and let's change the world.
She always sounded tough on the air. You know, a lot of girls on the radio sounded like, so happy and happy little voice. You know, Meg always sounded like she knew what was up, and she wasn't playing by any of the rules. Meg always sounded like she was cool.
One of the things that I had going for me was that I can tell a song's key when I'm listening to it, and I can tell what song will go with that song. And I think that's the difference between a DJ who could make the segues work and one who couldn't. I mean, it's really hard to go from Joni Mitchell into Aerosmith, but you can. If they're both in the same key and you just, as one's lowering, you fade up the other one, you can sort of put songs together that don't really go together, but they have to be in the same key, and it'd be nice if they were thematically work too. But other announcers just would go off on this ego trip, and they would play, you know, like 20 songs by the same artist, and it was like, you know what? I'm really Beatled out today.
If you're just going to play nothing but jazz for 5 or 6 hours, the only people listening at the end of the first hour are the people who already are nothing but jazz freaks. You didn't introduce anybody new to the concept of a different kind of music. So if you can figure out how to insert some jazz or some blues or some other particular category of music that may not be in the mainstream, if you can fit that in the mix of music and do it so well that the rock songs that are on each side of it are complementary to it, suddenly people go, wow, I love this. What is this? And Dad says, it's jazz. And you go, oh, I didn't think I liked jazz, but now I do. So what you've accomplished is you've opened somebody's mind and their ears to new ideas in music.
I got into freeform in New York City as the door was swinging closed. But I got in before it closed. So if you got the job at NEW, they didn't hire you to give you a list and tell you not only what to play, but what to say. They hired you because they assumed you knew. You knew your audience, you knew the culture, you lived within it. And so you could speak to those people because they were often of some kind of similar lifestyle to yours.
You have to imagine that these guys are doing it by the seat of their pants. It's like a great jazz musician improvises on the chords of the melody. These guys are improvising on the words of the song. They're just flipping. They're like letting their minds go and whatever turns them on. And that's fun radio. And Meg knows how to do that better than anybody else.
Yes, we gave local artists a chance. We'd put their records on the air. Now, most stations would not do that. If it wasn't on the national top 30 or top 40, it will not be played, right? I saw it differently. I said, wait a minute. So as a result, almost at any given time, you would find a local group on our top 50 chart. And that led to pretty explosive groups. The Ventures, for one, the Wailers, the Sonics, Merrill Lee Rush and the Turnabouts, Paul Revere and the Raiders. The list goes on because all they needed was exposure.
Another one of the things that I did at NEWFM was a series called Prisoners of Rock and Roll. And I think each week I chose to fill an hour with records by unsigned local people from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, mostly local. And then once a month we would pick 4 of them that we thought were the best and put them on stage at the Bottom Line and do a live Prisoners of Rock and Roll from the club.
The feeling you always got when you listened to Meg on the radio was that she was living it. When she wasn't on the air, she was out in New York, going to clubs, at Max's, at CB's.
There's this whole new raw great thing coming through. I was heavy-handed with that newer stuff. I always liked to mix it with the roots of rock and roll, with Elvis Presley or Buddy Holly or the stuff that preceded it, the stuff that I thought was real 3-chord guitar-driven rock and roll.
Let's go rockin' rock and roll radio. Let's go rockin' rock and roll radio. Let's go rockin' rock and roll radio. Let's go.
There's so many things Pat did behind the scenes that people don't know about that aren't really radio work. With Concerts West, promoting Elvis Presley, promoting Led Zeppelin. He basically built this company that is really the template for what national concert promotion companies still are today.
We were handling Glenn Campbell's dates and all of Three Dog Night and Steppenwolf. And then we pick up Hendrix. Pretty soon we have Led Zeppelin, and that leads us to Elvis. And Soon we have Creedence Clearwater, Moody Blues, Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, Chicago, the Beach Boys, Bachman Turner Overdrive. I mean, if you're the manager of an auditorium and you like revenue, and guess who brings you the revenue? Those guys from Concerts West.
Bette Midler's manager came in and gave me some really good Coke, and that was the first time I got turned on to it. And then I met a Coke dealer. His father would go down to Bogota and bring it back pure in his golf bags. It wasn't even cut. So the cocaine I was having, you could sleep on it. Radio was getting in the way of my cocaine habit. I mean, you know what? I don't even want to go to work today. I want to go do cocaine. So I quit radio for 2 years. I told everybody I was going to do TV, and I had done my radio thing, but really I just wanted to go do cocaine.
Jimmy had passed away in London, and we were kind of waiting to hear from someone in London and talk about arrangements. And a couple of days later, I get a call from Jimmy's dad, Al, and he said, "Pat, what have you heard?" And I said, "Al, haven't you heard anything?" He says, "Not a word." And so we called to London, and Jimmy was still at the morgue, and nobody had claimed the body. And so we put our Tom Hewlett on a plane and went to London and paid all the fees and everything and bought the coffin and claimed the body and shipped him back to Seattle. Al didn't have any money, so we bought the gravesite in Renton and paid for the funeral.
Pat O'Day's role was that he wasn't just a DJ, he was kind of the spokesperson. He was the king of Seattle music. So Jimmy dies, and somebody needs to throw a funeral. Well, Al Hendricks isn't capable of that. He's a gardener at that point. He doesn't have connections. So who do you call? You call Pat O'Day. So just like Pat O'Day had promoted a bunch of concerts, he essentially was the promoter who put on Jimi Hendrix's funeral.
The amazing thing was that all of the people that had made megabucks off of Jimmy, I'm talking about Warner Brothers and the agency, they just vanished. They did nothing. The record company attorney said, "We've got some royalty disputes going here, and we're just going to kind of be hands off on this." You know, are you kidding me? You know, a giant star of theirs has died, and they're not participating, and they owed him millions of dollars, and they don't put up a nickel for his burial.
He did things like that just because it was the right thing to do. He didn't make money by putting the funeral on. In fact, he spent probably 2 weeks of his time trying to make sure it happened.
I was having great difficulty living in Montreal because I only speak one language. But I felt as a communicator, I was missing out on half of the population. And I'd wanted to get back to Toronto. And so I made some phone calls, and I called the VP, a chum, and he said, "Well, you don't want to be doing FM, you want to be on our AM, right?" And I said, "No, I do FM now." And he was, "You don't want to do FM, nothing's going to happen there, that's just a bunch of crazy hippies." I went and had a coffee somewhere, came back in an hour, and I learned that I was then employed by Chum FM.
There's only one reason for a rock musician to wake up early in the morning. It's because he's nuts. That's why I listen to Charles Lacrodera on the way to my therapist.
This guy, Tommy Hadges, who was my coworker back in the early days of BCN, had now become the program director of the station. So he tricked me into having lunch with him. I didn't want to leave my mirror and my little couch and my cranberry juice and my cocaine. But he talked me into going to lunch with him. So I took my little vial of cocaine and I went to lunch with Tommy Hadges.
I certainly knew that he was using drugs. I didn't know personally the extent of it.
They brought me into this room, this office, and the comptroller was there, the woman with the money, the accountant, and the program director, Tommy Hadges, and the manager, station manager, Clee Dobra. And they were all there, and they brought me in this room, and they started asking me if I wanted to come back to radio, and I said, no.
I wasn't worried that he couldn't perform, because he can perform, even if he's under the influence. He performs better if he's not, but he's able to pull it off.
And they said, we need you to motivate the station. We got to get the station going again. And you were always a motivator. And they said, how much do you want? And I said, I'll be right back. And I went into the restroom and I did a couple of things of snorts of cocaine. And I came back and I said, and I named this outrageous number. I said, I want $500 a week, which at the time was, and so they said, okay. So I said, wait a minute. I went back in the restroom and I snorted again. I came back and I said, clear. I want that clear, 500 clear. So the comptroller, the other, she says, they said, okay. And I said, and I don't want to do any Army or Navy or Marines ads. No ads for war. They looked at each other. Okay. So I'll be right back. And I go into the bathroom and I come back. And I go, no ads for gasoline. No oil companies. Okay. We can put them on the rest of the station. Yeah, I don't care, as long as they're not in my show. Okay, do that. So, and I want 8 weeks of vacation paid. They said, okay.
We wanted a good show, and, he was his own person. I wasn't there to be his father to tell him what to do or what not to do. I didn't want to see him destroy himself, but at the same time, recreational use.
And I'm getting frustrated now because I don't want to do it. And then I say, and I'm not going to use my real name. And they said, we'll be right back. And they went out and they came back and they said, okay.
No one in the listening audience knew that I was Dave Mickey for about 2 weeks. And then the Toronto Star published a big article about, is this guy really Dave Mickey? Because I had gone from one extreme to the other. All in the name of what I believed, and all in the name of reflecting the music and being honest with myself and the audience.
Talking on the air, going for it, man.
This guy that I knew, a buddy of mine, said, hey, one of the kids in my classmates' name was Dwayne Glasscock. And I said, I like that. Dwayne Glasscock, that's who I'm going to be. And Dwayne Glasscock was crazy. I did all the things as Dwayne Glasscock that I never could do as Charles Lacrodera. I called women girlies and playing all kinds of tapes like, you ever been boned up the ass for being a fucking wise guy? And then the clients would go, did he really say boned up the ass for being a fucking wise guy? And our salespeople go, no, he said, you ever been phoned and upped in mass for being a lucky wise guy?
The Dwayne Glasscock, awesome, wicked, great, fantastic, major, rad bonus show. What can I do for you?
Dwayne, do you mind if I smoke while you eat?
Hello, Ray Gould. Hey, what's your name?
Karen.
Girly Watch, Karen. I'm Dwayne English Glasscock. Oh, Dwayne? Girly Watch. Oh, you're not a girl. Who are you? Girly Watch.
Brigitte?
Yeah.
So what are you up to?
Doing some bongs.
What are you doing to the bungs, Brigitte?
Doing them up.
We were all hypocrites. We'd go, don't say girl, it's a woman. And then the mic would be off. Go, look at that ass. We knew what we were supposed to do, but on the side, have a few drinks and you become the thing that you're. Dwayne did all the things on Saturday that I was not allowed to do 5 days of the week during my show.
I'm Dave Marston, and some girls just seem to have what it takes. Look at Cindy make the scene. She's young, vital, and avant-garde.
Chum was totally free form. The DJs were allowed to play whatever we wanted from this massive library. Literally thousands and thousands and thousands of albums. And we were allowed to do whatever we wanted in our shows. And one night I came in, and Bob Lane had been moved out to Winnipeg, and the guy who followed him met me in the hallway before I was to go on at 6, and he said, oh, here's your playlist. And I was like, what's a playlist? I don't even know what a playlist is. Well, this is the songs you're going to play tonight. Oh, I don't think so. I play what I and the listeners want. Well, we have new rules now. You're going to play this. And I said, no. So I ran up to the second floor at Chum and talked to my friend Fred Sherratt. And I said, how long will it take you to accept my resignation? And he said, 30 seconds. And I had #1 ratings. And then my final night, when I came out of the building at 10 o'clock, Yonge Street was covered with people, all waiting to say goodbye. I couldn't allow myself to sell out for the money. Was I facing a zero? Was I facing a struggle? Of course I was. I didn't know what I was facing. But I didn't see gloom in it. I just saw a new challenge.
Pat O'Day, Seattle, Channel 95.
In the end of 1974, I've been there 15 years. I've been driving down the same street to the same office to the same building, and I've done it over and over again. Weekends I had to be on the concert road because we always said that one of the majors had to be there at every major show. I'd be all over the eastern United States and back on the red eye Sunday night and in the office Monday morning. And that was every other week.
He would fly across the country to sign a contract and fly back an hour later. I mean, it was a crazy jet set lifestyle in an era where very few people in music live that kind of lifestyle.
You get to the point where you say, I've been doing this in this building for 15 years, you know, and it's time for me to take a look at the rest of my life and see where I go.
Now time for me.
Is that me? Am I supposed to push buttons now? Okay.
It came at an interesting time
Yeah, it works.
because there was something happening with music at that point that was causing a shakeup that had really started in the early 70s with the arrival of anybody from the New York Dolls to the Ramones to Patti Smith. Radio was still really kind of playing it safe, even if it was freeform.
We were playing a lot of the Stones and Led Zeppelin and artists like that. And then this pain in the ass, Meg Griffin, joined our station. And she was into Patti Smith and Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson, and it was sort of a whole lot more contemporary than even what we were playing. And she built up this extraordinary following.
I didn't go in there to take shots at anybody or to insult what these people who came before me were doing. They were my heroes. I had grown up listening to them, and now I was working with them. It was like, whoa, how did I get here? And I was only playing what I believed in. I had no intent to insult anybody.
There was a handful of people that were really supporting this thing that was called New Wave or punk or whatever. Meg jumped right into it. It talked to her. It spoke to her. And she was gonna tell everybody about it.
I got a call kind of one afternoon, and it was the Allen brothers. They said, we have this little radio station out in Brampton, and we don't know what to do with it. It was fairly esoteric, and the signal could reach about 12 blocks. And it was in an old putrid yellow house. It was filthy. There was just dirt everywhere. Nobody had ever bothered to clean the floors. It was just disgusting. The control room is about the size of a smart car. And the ceilings are like 4 feet high. Everybody's leaning down. I thought, I think I should leave. But something whispered in my ear and said,
No, don't leave. You can make something of this, David.
It was maybe the hardest decision of my career, for sentimental reasons as well as career reasons. I loved Scott Muni, the program director at NEW. To this day, I consider him my radio father. He kept hearing rumors that I was going to go, and I was having a hard time telling him. And he got me on the phone at home one night, and he said, I'm hearing stuff, And I said, yeah. And what are you doing? I was kind of up against a wall. I couldn't stall anymore. And I said, well, I don't want to leave you and NEW, but I do want to have more input, and this is a place where I can. And I remember him saying something to me like, I guess I'll see you around at a party or something. I hung up the phone, and I remember I was shaking in my little apartment, and I was crying, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? It was really, I was sort of going way out on a limb into the unknown.
Their general manager was Pat Hurley, and he invited me to a luncheon. And he offered me the opportunity of being the program director. You see, I wear this ring. The day I went to the lunch, I put it on. And he offered me what I wanted, and I've never taken it off since.
One of the things that made working at CFNY so special back in that era was that it was so unconventional. While all these other radio stations were tightly formatted, Marsden insisted on a sense of creativity and free spirit. He would be very, very concerned about how the announcers mixed records. It was all about the flow of one song to the next. And he didn't care whether you mixed a record halfway done into the next one, as long as you managed to maintain that flow, that sense of occasion, that sense of drama with the music that you were playing. It wasn't a shift, it was a show.
The slogan was WPIX, New York's rock and roll, from Elvis to Elvis. When I went to Pix, I was the music director, and I was on the air full time, and the station was beloved by everybody from the B-52s and the Plasmatics to John Lennon, who came up and told us especially how much Yoko loved the station. He said, "Oh, Mum's got it on at home all the time," and he said something about how everything that we play here reminded him a bit of Mum's music. And the Police came in, and the Police had just made a record for $12,000 and were touring the country in a little van. It was really early on in the careers of many of those people. They knew that's exactly what our goal was to be rock and roll.
Management decided to cut corners. They fired the desk girl, some of the secretaries, they fired a few salespeople, they fired a couple of the announcers, and we immediately went on strike. And all the sponsors dropped and just stayed with us. I mean, we were so powerful. So they capitulated, and they brought everybody back. We actually were the only station, I think, that ever went on strike and won.
I was home one day, spending the daytime with my son, planning to go in and do my show that night, and my then husband, Joe, the program director at Pix, called to say, "I don't think you have to come in tonight." And I'm like, "Really? Why would I not come in tonight to do my show?" "Well, we have a new general manager." And I'm like, "Oh, here it comes." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "They're changing the format." And I said, "Well, what are they changing the format to?" And he says, "Love songs, nothing but love songs." So I came in and I looked for this new general manager, and I said, "I think you want to talk to me." And he couldn't believe that, some uppity rock and roll female DJ was actually standing up for her rights.
Dwayne goes on the air one Saturday after the ratings came out, and he says, there's this company called ARB, and they're like Arbitron Research Bureau, and they're down in Delaware or Maryland, and there's all these big fat guys with cigars and Cadillacs, and they decide who gets the ratings and decide who gets the money, and it's all fixed and it's all corrupt. So they're lying to you. So here's what I want you all to do. Everybody get a bag of shit and put it in a cellophane bag and send it to Arbitron Research Bureau. That's ARB 14, whatever, and he gave the address out. And Dwayne did this every break for an entire show from 10 to 2. So Monday morning comes, and Charles Laquadera, not Dwayne, Charles Laquadera is doing a show, me. So the boss puts his head in the studio during my show, and he goes, "Charles, when you get off the air, I need to see you." So I go into his office at the end of the show, and I'm sitting there, and he's got this huge cup of coffee, and he's stirring it with his finger. He's so pissed off at me, and he's looking at me, and you can see the smoke coming out of the cup, and there he is stirring it with his finger, and he's going, "Charles Laquadera is a professional, and he's a competent disc jockey, and he's truly an excellent artist. But Dwayne Glasscock is a fucking asshole, and he's fired."
And I went in and he told me that they were changing the format to love songs, nothing but love songs, and that we were not needed. I said, "Well, but am I being fired because I didn't do my job? Did I not do the job of a music director and a show at night. It wasn't that I would want to be on in this new format, no way. But what's my cause of being fired? And at that point he said to me, well, your husband was the program director and we've let him go, so we just figured. And I said, you can't do that. You're firing me because of who I was married to.
You can't fire Dwayne. Dwayne's like got incredible ratings. He's got like a number 13. How are you going to fire him? And he looks at me and he goes, are you talking with a full deck? You're acting like Dwayne's a real person. And I go, you just fired him.
He said to me, well, you get your lawyer and I'll get mine. And I thought, what an asshole. And I said, yeah, well, you're on. So I went to AFTRA and I said, this doesn't float. And they said, you're absolutely right, this doesn't float. He was forced to write me a check. And it wasn't a big check. But he had to take an action that showed that he was wrong. And that was what the important thing was, as far as I was concerned. NEW did take me back. I was very grateful.
Rather recently, where that everything was a bit manic down there because of...
Selkirk tried twice to get us on the CN Tower, and both times they were rejected. And then I came up with this idea of, let's do a traffic study. They were then able to prove that this entire community called Brampton got up every morning and went to Toronto. Why should they have to do without their local radio station when they're in the city? And it worked.
This is WNWFM in New York. I have the extremely sad task of informing you that John Lennon died tonight. He was shot and fatally wounded in front of his home at the Dakota.
The night that John was murdered, NEW had been doing their Christmas concert. So everybody's in this great Christmas mood and they're seeing a great concert and all those toys under the tree. And then this news. Vin Scelsa knew, God bless him, that somebody has got to get back on the air and be with the audience.
And I am at a loss for words. I think for the first time in my career on the radio, I don't have anything to say.
And he went back to NEW and he got on, and what he did, because he could barely speak either, I thought it was so generous of him because he was in such pain over what had happened, was to open up the airwaves to phone calls from the listeners and give them a place to go with their grief.
My first thought was, as it always is, and that is, I've got to get to the radio station. And immediately went on the air. I stayed on all night, and then I talked to my friend Don Schaefer. Somewhere in that conversation came the idea of having a network of radio stations. All of the radio stations in the network would do the exact same thing at the exact same time. At 12 noon on the Sunday, we would all read the same script.
Collectively, we will remember John Lennon, a man with a dream that one day the human race would find peace.
And then there'd be 30 seconds of silence, and then we would play the song. We had about 37 Canadian radio stations, and we had over 700 American radio stations in the network.
There was a memorial for John, I think it was the following Sunday, at the band shell. It was a beautiful gathering of people in pain. It was winter, it was gray. Imagine started to play. The sun came out, but at the same time, it started snowing. And you do not usually see those two things simultaneous. It's rare, you know. It really felt like, it just felt appropriate, you know, as nobody could really speak and you're walking out and I'm looking up going, sunny and it's snowing, like two of the most beautiful things that could happen in Central Park, which was a place that John and Yoko loved so much. So that was a moving thing.
I kept doing coke until we had a baby. And then when we had a baby, she came down one night and she said, I'm worn out. I've been up all night with our baby. Can you take him? And I said, I've been up for 3 days. I can't take him. And she goes, you have to take him. So I sent everybody home and I went upstairs and I sat in the bed with her and I said, give me one more chance. You let me get some sleep tonight. And I give you my word, tomorrow when I wake up, I will not be doing cocaine again. But every year, I'm going to do cocaine one night at the WBCN Christmas party. And I won't do any during the year. And if I do one line during that time, I will go to recovery program. I'll go to whatever. And she did not want to do it. She was so tired. She said, one time, you only get one chance. I'll take the baby. So she kept the baby. I got my sleep. I woke up. And another one of those, what did I do? And so for a whole year, I would walk with blinders past all the mirrors, all the disco, all the cocaine that was just blowing all over the place in the early 80s.
In the business that I have worked in all these years, a fair amount of partying naturally goes along with it. And for many years, a variety of sources want to buy it for you. Your money is no good anywhere, and it's being thrown at you, whether it's white powder or vodka or anything in between. That can kind of accelerate a problem if there's one there to begin with. One night on a Monday, a few of us decided to go out and have a couple drinks. And I think I got home at 8 in the morning. I didn't go to work for the rest of the week. And by the Friday of that week, thank God, something reached me. And I said to myself, I got to go to a meeting. And I didn't know anything about the program. Found a place to go, went, and never in my life felt that I was so in the right place as walking into a room like that.
Radio was a heavy drinking business back then. And we all drank a lot. And when we're young, we can do that. And, you know, in the concert business, there's lots of cocaine and all sorts of stuff that you get involved in. And it came to the point where some friends of mine were alarmed. They thought I was overdoing it, and I was. And so they had an intervention and told me I was going to this place called Schickshadel Hospital. Boy, I hated that. but I went. I said, fine, I'll play their game for 10 days, right? Get them off my back. And then I can drink socially and everything will be fine, right? Oh, I went there determined I would beat the system. The system beat me. I left there 10 days later to say, what have I been thinking anyway? And that was it. Never another drink or another joint or anything. Just gone. Done. So many of you are frightened inside, caught in that dark tunnel of alcohol and drug addiction. But there's a light at the end of that tunnel, and it's Schickshadel Hospital, which in just 10 days can bring you out of the tunnel into the sunshine of a happy, sober new life.
I heard you on the wireless back in 52, lying awake intently tuning in on you. If I was young, it didn't stop you coming through. They took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten by machine on new technology, and now I understand the problems you could see.
MTV held auditions, and everybody in the universe that I know that had anything at all to do with rock and roll went in for these auditions because it was like, wow, what is this new idea? A week or so later, I got a phone call at home and they wanted me. There I am at NEWFM. I've come back after having left. I was a bad girl. I left. They've been good enough to hire me back. I'm only part-time. I want to protect that. I love spinning records. Radio is my passion. One day when I was sitting in the offices at MTV, I heard Bob on the phone with somebody say, I've got my black, my Jew, my sex bomb, my wasp, and now my tomboy. And I'm sitting there listening to this. And I'm like, oh. So am I being hired for having any talent? Or is it just an entire typecast thing? But what really made me say I'm not doing this was Bob asked me if I was doing anything else at the time. I said, yeah, I do some part-time work at WNEW-FM. Oh, you got to quit that. And I was like, why? Well, I don't want anybody wearing two hats. And again, I said, why? Because my time schedule at NEW will not conflict with our time schedule for shoots here at MTV. And he said, no, it's just that if you have another gig to fall back on, you wouldn't have the same kind of fear of losing this job if this was the only job you had. I didn't get into rock and roll and the art of this whole thing to have a career that was fear-driven. There's enough people on the planet that have that. And I couldn't even believe the words I was hearing.
Meg Griffin is coming in right after 5 o'clock news.
Scott Muni was sure that I was going to MTV, and he goes, so I guess we've lost you. And I said, no, you haven't. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, they made me choose, Scott, and I want this. And I'll never forget the look on his face, because everybody wanted the MTV gig. I mean, really, everybody I know told me I was insane, that I had just career suicide. You just threw something out that would be so great. And I was like, no, I want to keep doing what I want to keep doing.
Mel Karmazin was the CEO. He'd come in like once a month, or, you know, with his briefcase and stuff. So I wrote a note to him saying, I figure your time is worth about $1,000 a minute. So here's $3,000, a check for $3,000. I need 3 minutes of your time.
And it was because I wouldn't see him, you know, and he felt frustrated. So he thought that he can buy me just like I bought him.
Karmazin comes in my office. He's got his briefcase. He's on the way out the door. And he says, you got 3 minutes. And I said, how come you don't talk to me anymore? How come we don't hang anymore? You just kind of seem aloof to me. And he looks at his watch. He says, when we have to do something that's good for the corporation, you always side with the workers. You say you're a union guy. You're not a fucking union guy. Do you know how much money you make? Do you know what I've given you? I have given you a percentage of the company. I have given you stock options in the company. Even Howard Stern doesn't have those.
If the argument is that you believe in a union and that everybody should be treated the same, then my attitude was then you should get paid the same amount of money that the other people who are on the air. You're all doing 4 hours on the air. Well, why are you worth more? Well, maybe it's because you're different. Well, so if you're different, then maybe we should treat you different. And then maybe we shouldn't have to have a union contract that says we have to treat everybody the same.
You should be looking out for us. You should be supporting us because we are giving you the money. We are supporting you. Instead, you always go on the other side and with the little people because you're a little person with a big house and an indoor pool. He said, okay, time's up, and he walked out. 3 weeks later, my accountant calls me and he goes, what's this check for $3,000? What's this for? I said, oh, he cashed it? He said, he cashed it. About 2 months later, I get an invitation to the White House for the first George Bush, to meet him at an invitational dinner.
First, let me just say that I am gratified.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lacudera, for your contribution to the Republican Party. About 6 weeks later, after that, I get a congratulations and thank you from the National Rifle Association for becoming a lifetime qualified member. And I can go to any of their meetings and I can meet Charlton Heston.
So I walked into the general manager's office and I said, we're going to do an award show. And he said, why? And I explained, wanted to give further exposure to all these bands who the Junos certainly wouldn't give exposure to. Canadian artist selected by you is what it stands for.
Right now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce the program director of radio station CFNY, and a man who, as Dave Mickey, the screaming rock and roll DJ, once recorded the song Granny Kitsch. She's a part-time witch.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of the Casby Music Awards, Mr. David Marsden.
Everybody come. Every record label was there. Every artist was there. It was just magnificent.
Good evening. This, of course, is the Casby Awards. This is the 6th annual Same Casby Awards. As you know,
I've been there at CFNY 11 or 12 years. I thought that we had accomplished what I set out to do, and I really thought my heart wasn't in it anymore. And if my heart wasn't in it, then how could I expect the people working within the team to have their heart in it? So to just stick around and take the money would be selfish. I really didn't have a clue what I was going to. I didn't have anything planned other than some nibbling from the CBC.
From the RPM Club in Toronto, Chris Shepard and David Marsden present Video.
Hi, I'm David Marsden. Welcome to RPM.
But just to do a streeter, it was like 5 people. Your camera and your sound, and your lights, and then makeup, and then you got the hosts.
Big pig video, I love it!
Did learn a lot doing it. I learned a lot about people, and I learned a lot about television, and I learned a lot about life.
Hi, I'm Meg Griffin.
This show was called New Grooves. My role there was very much the same as what it would have been at MTV, except we were, I think, edgier. And I felt like, okay, I can do this, but I could also do radio.
Hi, I'm Geraldo La Cuevera, investigative reporter for Michigas Around Town.
I don't have a filter. So a lot of times I get in a lot of trouble. I get in trouble with my family a lot of times. A lot of times I've lost friends. You know, I end up apologizing a lot because I really feel bad sometimes when I say the wrong thing. One time, we're sitting around, the music's playing, and somebody goes, "We just found out Ronald Reagan has cancer." So I go on the radio and I go, "Hey, there must be a God. Reagan's got cancer." And it was, to me, it was so funny. Boom. It was like, oh my God. I mean, even the liberals were saying, I mean, I just got clobbered for that. I went on the air, I had to apologize so many times for that.
I would always say to Charles, you're to the left of Lennon, John, and I'm to the left of Lennon, the other one.
My boss at the time, Oedipus, says, you know, your audience is gone. He says, your audience has moved over to ZLX. ZLX is playing classic rock. That's the music that was your new music, and now it's considered classic.
And I wanted to keep the station young. I wanted to keep the station focused on new music because that's what I loved. And I felt that was the best direction for the station, particularly in light that we owned a classic rock radio station.
The younger audience wants to hear Howard Stern. Howard Stern is on the air every day ranting about how, of all the stations, the one in Boston that he wants to be on, when is Charles Lockwood ever going to die? When is Charles Lockwood going to retire? Because they're playing Howard at night, because I'm on in the morning. So here's Howard doing a morning show in Boston at night, and he's all pissed off, well, mock pissed off. Howard liked me, always liked me, but you know, he never trashed me. And I feel lucky about that, because he can really trash. Howard could kill. So Oedipus is telling me they wanted me to leave BCN and go over to ZLX. They wanted to bring Howard in the morning, which was a smart thing to do.
With that move, though, when it was announced, from the letters and phone calls, you would have thought it was the worst decision I had ever made in my life. People were outraged. But it worked.
Meg, I think, is going. Put on her G-string and boogie.
Shut up, Howard.
I got to say, this is the best outfit I've ever seen you in.
Thank you. I knew you'd like it.
There was more clothes on Meg than any time I've ever seen her before. She's completely covered. Don't you want to attract a man?
Maybe you should watch what you say to women a little more these days,
Uh-oh.
What are you saying now?
Shut up.
This is like, this is like the angry woman.
Oh, calm down, Meg. Let him get a point out. Okay, dear.
You know what it is now? She just comes in to argue.
Yeah, now
that's her new
she's-
thing.
We had many, many visits like that, and a lot of them, as angry as they would get, would always end with what I perceive as affection. We would laugh once the mics would go off, So he's gone to great lengths to sort of set me off, much in the way that a brother who likes to torture his little sister, but always with some kind of an affection. He has many times on the air talked about me being like the greatest DJ and really knows her music, and God, I love her voice and her natural and this and that. And sometimes I'll accidentally catch it. I'll just, because I listen to him a lot, and all of a sudden he'll be talking about me, and it'll be so unbelievably complimentary. And coming from him, it means a lot.
You all should constantly be listening for the time that we drop in Stone's song titles, because if you pick the right
NEW
time...
started
Griffin,
to
I wanna
become more and more
remind you
formatted,
that this coming Saturday
which
night
was the
between
trend at that
11 and
point
12
with
midnight, we
FM
will have a
stations.
special concert for you, brought
And there
to you
was
by
less
7
and
Up.
less creative freedom for the DJs. And then a new program director was hired there who was very much about tightening everything up. Focus groups and research and demographics and anything but actual normal human response. I think it took the heart and soul out of the radio station.
I'd be hearing from the program directors, Meg has just gone off on this tangent. She played 5 songs in a row that were unfamiliar, that nobody, listening would ever listen to the station for those 5 songs in a row. And Meg would say, yeah, but these segues were so great, and I was weaving this theme throughout, and the program directors are sitting there saying, gee, my average quarter-hour ratings are going down, and Meg didn't care.
My preference, and most of us who worked there, would be to always work at a radio station where the creative freedom was there, and that I had people listening who were really listening to hear something of value, as opposed to, say, offer me a job at a radio station where they've got 50 million listeners, but I have no freedom.
I cannot play the corporate game they play. Somebody sits in Chicago and says, okay, the station will do this and this and this and this, and that's it. And we don't want any surprises. Oh, I'm sorry, take the surprises out of radio, and you take radio out of radio.
They keep playing the same 400 songs over and over and over and over and over. 400 songs over and over. Do you know how many songs there are? If you just wanted to play 80s, 90s, and current, we're talking hundreds of thousands of songs, and they were playing 400 of them? That's for a program director who wants to set his radio station up and then go home. A radio station is never finished. That's just a program director who doesn't want to work.
When I was working at WFUV, Meg and I had sort of passed at a couple of different radio stations, and she said, oh man, you have a great gig there at FUV. I said, well, what if there was one very similar to mine? Would you be interested? She said, I think I might be interested. From some important folks. I was doing the middays and Meg was doing afternoons. So from 10 till 6, we just had the best time. And then she'd get off the air at 6. We'd go out to shows. We'd be at the Bottom Line until 2 in the morning, back on the air at 10. It was a wonderful, wonderful time.
Had a lot of freedom there, had a ball, got a lot of love back from the audience.
We'd have these on-air membership drives at FUV. And when Meg was on, her show would bring in like $10,000 in 1 hour. And the hour would end and she'd go into Studio A and play a song with her band Trainwreck, and the calls would just be ringing and people would just be, contributing money. And it was just this wonderful outpouring in a very organic way from listeners. So she was totally a natural.
I got a call from some people here in Toronto who wanted to do radio, but they wanted to do it on the internet. 12 people knew about the internet then. It wasn't like it is now. This was an opportunity to really hone in on boutique-styled radio. So we set up a bunch of channels, all formulated to different elements of music. We had a huge building. We had radio studios and producers, and it was a big operation. There was a lot of money coming off of Bay Street to keep it going. We were so early in the game that nobody could get their handle around how to make money with it apart from advertising. And you'd go to the advertising agencies and you'd say internet to them, and they'd look at you like you were from another planet. Like, what's that, you know?
So when Sirius came along and started to woo me to come here, and it took me a year to decide whether or not I would do it, that was a very hard decision, like leaving NEW had been a hard decision, because I wasn't leaving a place because I didn't like it. I was just thinking of taking another leap to a new place because it was, in the case of Sirius, it was a bigger challenge and it scared me. And I thought, okay, if I'm afraid of this, then maybe I should do it. I first got to Sirius and they started to bring all this equipment into my office that was going to be necessary for doing this whole new kind of broadcasting. And I got on the phone and started calling friends saying, I'm scared. And they're like, what's wrong? I said, they keep bringing computers and equipment into my room here. You know, it was really quite terrifying when I first arrived here, but very exciting because it was kind of a new way to deliver music. And this time, for the first time, I was on nationally. And one of the most amazing things that ever happened shortly after I was hired here, they took us upstairs to a big conference room, and on closed-circuit television, we watched from Kazakhstan, Russia, the launch into outer space of our satellites.
Some Americans are invited into Russia to kind of bring them up to speed on what the rest of the world is doing. And as a result, I'm hired to go to St. Petersburg, Russia, and train the staff of the first rock and roll radio station in St. Petersburg. During that week, the disc jockeys at the station had said, Pat, would you record a show? Said a lot of people understand English here, and you have a certain style that we'd like. Why don't you record 3 hours and we'll play it on Sunday afternoon and make a big deal out of it. I said, okay, so I recorded 3 hours. Now, I put that out of my mind. I am walking in the courtyard at the Hermitage. The car door is open, and the radio is playing. And as I am taking videos of the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia, I hear myself on the radio saying, that was the Beach Boys. It's 20 minutes after 2 o'clock in St. Petersburg. How are you this afternoon? And I go, oh my God, it happened in my lifetime. I am on the radio in St. Petersburg, Russia, playing the Beach Boys.
I didn't want to stay at ZLX forever. It was just, radio was changing. It was getting more and more corporate. So I really didn't like my last 5 years of radio because I wasn't being me. I just had to get out.
Hello, Rangoon! This is Charles Laquadera reminding you 30 fantastic, wonderful years. It's been a great ride. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, fellow radio people. Thank you, Boston. Thanks, everybody. It's been great. If the creek don't rise, there ain't no meltdown. Whoops.
Facebook right now is my radio show. I'll put songs up there and people go, oh, wow, I haven't heard that in a long time. I'll say some hippie liberal tree hugger thing and get a lot of people pissed off, and I'll put a joke up there. I'll post a cartoon. It's kind of like a radio show, and I do it whenever I want.
It is a safe house for music and the people who love it. We call it The Loft, from a new album which is called Banga. I really love my work, and now on the channel called The Loft, it's straitjacket free. It's rules and regulation free. It's focus group free. It's radio programmed by humans for humans. And I would do that forever.
If a young man or a young woman is listening to me today and has a great idea, don't try to sell it to Clear Channel or Chorus in Canada. Look for the independent guys who own 3 or 4, like The Rock.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those in outer space, welcome to the Marsden Theater.
When they first came to me, it was the owner who spoke at the lunch, who said, what will it take to get you back on the radio? And I said, directly to the owner, not some CEO or MBA or something nonsense like that, what are you offering? And he said, you can do whatever you want. And I said, will you put that in writing? And he said, I will. He's the owner. Now, that was 9 years ago. And I'm still doing it, and they have never once interfered.
I tell you, as we gather here in the nighttime in the Marsden Theater, where all things are good, and where you can say to yourself, Achtung!
If somebody would give me a station to program and leave me alone, I will get them humongous ratings. If somebody does that, yeah, I'm back in. Oh, right now.
The name Pat O'Day will be a legend, a legendary name in Seattle music history forever.
I was totally lucky being at the right place at the right time in the right period in history, because there's no way that I, even Charles Laquadera, with all my whatever 30 years of experience, there's no way I could get a job in radio right now. I mean, I could get one, but I wouldn't get paid more than $100 a week.
Charles was recognized. He was the actor he always wanted to be. He was just an actor in a different medium.
Anybody can play records. Only a few can play music. You at home can play records. You might not be able to mix them the way I do.
Who was the tallest president? You tell me. Abe Lincoln? No, he was shot. Now see, no one gets that except people from Boston, because people from Boston say shot and shot, same word, same word.
In the Marston Theater tonight, we've turned it into a movie studio. I feel like Liza Minnelli, but I look like Brad Pitt.